Mr McMillan.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First of all, I'd like to thank Graham Simpson for bringing this debate to the Chamber. Also, Mr Bibby, if you're going to quote me, please quote me accurately. I did say worker when I spoke earlier on in a previous debate as compared to workforce. And also Mr Rennie. Mr Rennie spoke about the Yard. Mr Rennie, the Yard shut in 2014. The Yard went into liquidation in 2019. That tells me there was a problem with that Yard for a long period of time. Clearly, the issue of procurement is crucial in any contract, and I will come back to the issue of procurement, part of the motion that Mr Simpson put down in a moment. The Conservative motion also states, and I quote, calls for the Scottish Government to say why it awarded the contract for ferries 801 and 802 to Ferguson Marine Engineering Limited against the advice of its own experts. First of all, these experts, CMAL, these are the same experts that the Conservatives, Labour and the Lib Dems have castigated and demonised for the last few years. Now that it suits them, now that it suits the Conservative narrative, they're actually trying to cosy up to CMAL. Now, I think it's quite obvious that I think it's quite obvious that the language towards CMAL has changed since the Audit Scotland report. I gently suggest to MSPs from any party that they should engage with CMAL to learn about their work and also their understanding of what they actually do. CMAL play an important part across this country, but also to Port Glasgow, where they're based. I can assure Mr Simpson and his Conservative colleagues that if the Scottish Government had sat on its hands and did nothing in 2019, the Yard was closing, the jobs were gone, the vessels would have been towed elsewhere, and political parties would have been canvassing in Newark apartments for last week's council elections, where a shipyard once stood. Is Graham Simpson seriously suggesting that the SNP Scottish Government should have sat on its hands, as the Labour Lib Dem Scottish Executive did in 2005, after they awarded the fishery protection vessel to Poland? I'm sure that Mr Simpson and also other Conservative colleagues would have been urging the Scottish Government to intervene to save the jobs. However, certainly after some of his earlier comments, we've only 4 minutes, I'm sorry. However, if after Mr Simpson's earlier comments, it's apparent that if I genuinely don't believe that the Conservatives actually would have stepped in, so that Yard would have shut. Intervening saved the jobs and also provided an opportunity for the future. Now, progress has been made at the Yard. There's still some way to go. There is still some way to go. Operational decisions of which vessel opportunities to pursue are for the Ferguson management team and the Board of Directors. There's also no doubt that getting the vessels completed, these two vessels, 801 and 802, have been extremely challenging. Clearly they have been. But let's be clear, these vessels must be delivered as soon as possible. And I've said that before in this chamber. There can be no ifs and no buts when it comes to lifeline services for our island communities, and the procurement process for vessels 801 and 802 was undertaken thoroughly, in good faith and following appropriate due diligence, and suggestions to the contrary are incorrect. And only last month, Presiding Officer, MSPs from across this chamber and also the local MP attended the Yard. We visited the Yard, and also everyone had a chance to ask any question they wanted to the new Chief Executive and also to the secondee from CMAL. And certainly, colleagues from across the chamber did that. And it's clear the Yard are making progress, but there is still some way to go, as I've stated. And I know that's certainly from the phone calls I get from the workforce when I talk to them. And on the issue of procurement, which I still come back to, if the Scottish Conservatives really do actually want to talk about procurement, look at their colleagues in Westminster. Look at the shambles that's going on in Westminster. Look at the £10.5 billion worth of pandemic-related contracts without a competitive tender process in the VIP lane, and that companies with the right political connections were 10 times as likely to win these contracts. Presiding Officer, I will take no lessons from the Tories, whether here or from Westminster. And also, although Aaron has voted for a Tory, thankfully there are 63 fewer Tory councillors in Scotland as of last week. Thank you very much.